I've served in the National Guard for some time, but I'm currently on medical leave for a shrapnel wound that I received from an IED that took out the truck I was driving. I still can't believe I'm still alive, but that's not the point. I feel it's my duty to tell my story to somebody who will listen. I'm not sure if it was about a year or so ago, but close to that. I was driving through dense forest in the outskirts of Montana. I was on my way back to base after a long night of drinking. I'm not sure what time it was, probably around 3 to 4 in the morning. I was driving through this portion of forest, and I heard a strange sound. It was reminiscent of bones rattling on pavement, except it was very loud. Afterwards, it sounded like it was coming uphill for me. I stopped my vehicle in the middle of the road and got out of the car to examine what was making the sound. It kept getting closer. Then, I had this very bad feeling come over me, like I needed to get out of there. I took off running back to the car, the rattling sound still getting louder and closer. And as I reached my car door, I turned around and saw it. It was easily the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. It was hunched over. It was big. It looked to weigh around 250 or 300 pounds, covered in long golden hair, but I could see its skin. It had long arms and long legs, and a very large head and small dark eyes. It was running toward me, making this horrible sound. I was terrified. I got in my car, driving as fast as I could. I kept looking in my rearview mirror to make sure it wasn't chasing, but I think it vanished. I wasn't sure what I saw. I know it was not human. I don't know any names for this creature, or what you would call it, or why I was acting so aggressive, but I have never been so scared in my life, and I have ample military training. This is still very difficult for me to talk about. Anyway, I started dating my fiancée in 2000. I'm currently 29, and we've been together for nearly 15 years. We have a 2-year-old, and we live in rural Washington state. In 2005, he was working an evening shift, and I stayed home with our 2-year-old. We don't have any animals, so I can't speak with animals. But I can tell you what I saw, and what I still fear to this day. It was a warm summer evening, and I had my bedroom window open. I woke up to a large helicopter sound, which was unusual because our rural area doesn't have many choppers going through it. I sat up in bed and saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes looking in at me through our window. Our backyard is fenced in, and the closest house was at least half a mile away, but the sound of the helicopter did not make any sense. I was terrified. I grabbed my daughter, hiding in the closet. I stayed there with my daughter for a couple of hours, and my fiancé eventually got off work. We were asleep on the couch. I woke up, telling him what I saw. He laughed it off like I was crazy, and told me I was dreaming. I was so frightened, though, that I could not sleep that night. In fact, I laid awake all night, and I'd heard the sound of a loud screech that I'd never heard before or since. I was so relieved. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure what that chopper sound was, because it wasn't exactly a helicopter, it just sounded like a helicopter, but it sounded far more strange. Anyway, maybe you can figure it out. This was a very, very, very long time ago. I was so frightened by everything that happened. I'm not exactly sure what to explain or how to explain it. I know what I saw, though, and what I saw was not normal. I wish I knew more about these things, but it is difficult to talk about. Hopefully you are able to use my story. Hello. I've been reading your material now for a while, and thought I would just post this here. This happened around 2007. I was stationed at Fort Drum, New York. I was part of the 82nd Airborne Division, 13th Infantry Battalion. We were going to be doing training at a location roughly 10 miles away. So, our battalion was broken up into 3 different sections. There was me, the HQ section, 1st and 2nd platoons, and then the 3rd platoon. 3rd platoon had 2 Humvees, both equipped with machine guns. Our job was to transport the 3rd platoon to their location, then return to the battalion So, we did just that. We got to the location, dropped off the 3rd platoon and drove off, not realizing that we had just left 2 of our guys behind. They had to hitch a ride with another group. So, we were just driving back down the road that we had come in on, when we just happened to drive by a patch of forest on the right side of the road. On the left was an open field leading up to a fence surrounding a field. So, as soon as we drive by the forest, we noticed something in it. It was dark, whatever it was, so we couldn't exactly make out what it was. We just kept driving and didn't say anything. But I saw the driver glance back at me, and back at it. The gunner did the same thing. Then the driver stopped the Humvee. He kinda got out to take a look. At first, we kind of thought it was a deer, but we realized this was not a deer at all. We speculated what it could have been. Possibly a Bigfoot, but we weren't sure. It appeared or seemed to notice us and stared off in our direction. We didn't want to scare it, so we didn't do or say anything, not making a sound. It didn't appear to be angry or anything, just more curious. We figured it would be best we didn't stay there. So we got back in the Humvee and drove off. Went back to the battalion. It was definitely a weird experience, but I believe in Bigfoot, and I know they exist. I have not reported this sighting to any of my superiors. I'm an E4 specialist with the rank of technician, 5th grade in the National Guard. There are 4 ranks above me, private to specialist 5, while I'm in a special of privates, non-commissioned officers, otherwise known as NCOs, and privates, grunts, basically. On July 4th, 1997, myself and another NCO and grunts from our company, B 53rd Battalion, Military Police Advisor Group, and the Squadron, 1134th Military Police Group, California National Guard, have been assigned security duty for an auto-imported location at the intersection of Route 15 and Route 189, town of Kahului, island of Maui. This duty was to set up to protect the property after numerous thefts of auto parts and vehicles. We had been on duty for approximately 1 hour when we noticed a light in the sky moving south of us, coming from over the mountain range behind us. This was to the east of the location. We were north of the airport and the mountain range. When we first noticed the light in the sky, it was approximately 1 mile from us, moving in a south direction. After approximately 5 to 7 minutes, we could tell the light was coming closer to us. At this time, we could see that the light was moving in a zigzag pattern, and we began to discuss what it could be. We thought it might be a chopper, but there was no sound. It was approximately the size of a car light at night, and at this time, we were all on our phones trying to find out what it could be. We even asked the building manager to turn on the floodlights. We were all now looking toward the light. After approximately 5 more minutes, the light began to move rapidly and was now coming straight toward us. At this time, one of the grunts, a private first class, began to shoot at the light. We then asked him to stop shooting, as we did not want to hit this thing. We didn't know what it was. At this time, the light stopped moving mid-air and began to move again in a zigzag pattern, and then stopped again. At this time, we could see that the light was getting closer to us and was now approximately 1/2 mile away. At this time, it still was not making any sound whatsoever. Now it was beginning to act even more weird. The light began to move again and was now coming at us at a rapid rate of speed. We were talking to the state of police and the building manager at this time, trying to get an answer as to what this light could be. State Patrol said it could be a helicopter, but there was no sound, and it was far too close to the ground. At this time, the light was approximately 1/4 mile away from us, getting closer. We could tell now that the light was moving at a very high rate of speed and was still heading directly at us. Shortly after this, the light stopped and hovered directly above us. At this time, everybody around now was getting on the ground, trying to get out of the light. It was almost all-encompassing. Immediately, this light emanated an ear-piercing mechanical noise that was the equivalent of two ships colliding. I thought I was going to go deaf. We all put our hands over our ears and began to yell at each other to see if we could still hear and feel the vibration in the ground. After approximately 1 moment, the light began to pulsate, getting brighter and dimmer. Then, moving to the right, down the mountain, over the airport, until it was entirely out of view. At this time, the state police arrived and wanted to fully know what was going on. They were told to get back in their cars, were told to not come anywhere closer by the NCO in charge, and stay where they were. At this time, the light was out of view, and state police left and said they were going to try and find out more what it was. We went back to the building and tried to get some sleep after that. We had to be up at 6 a.m. to relieve the day shift. We were scheduled to be up at 0600 hours and stayed at the location until 1930 hours, when we got relieved by day shift. We never saw anything else strange, but we did hear an aircraft over the mountain range to the south. The light had come from the north, about 1 hour after the light had disappeared. We could not see the aircraft, but we could hear it. The aircraft was loud, sounded like it was directly over the peak of the mountain. The aircraft came over the mountain 3 separate times and sounded to be getting closer to the location each time. But we did notice the light had not returned to the area. It is now approximately 0400 hours, and I'm getting ready to go to bed. I'm trying to get this down on paper before I forget what happened. We were at the location for 2 days afterwards. No problems, no other lights over the mountain or heard in the area. On the way back to our armory in the town, we checked the area where the light had stopped on the ground and was very hot in several areas. We also found metal fragments that looked similar to aluminum. They were burned and had a very strange texture. Fragments approximately the size of a quarter. We have not heard from anyone from the state police as to what this was. We were told that they are investigating to see what else they can find. We were told there was an area in the mountainside that was burned and still smoking, and a very strong chemical odor is very much present. We were also informed to not talk about this to anybody, as it is a military matter. I'm a private with at least 1 year in the military. No experience with the paranormal really, other than this, and hopefully at least one reason to take this story seriously. I was a private, so don't believe me unless you feel like taking a word of a run-of-the-mill soldier. But I'm certain I saw something. I was at a National Guard training facility for 3 days, patrolling the area for intruders. I wasn't sure what I was patrolling for. Terrorist? Maybe. So I was on constant alert. The woods were dark and spooky, and there were no real clear-cut paths, so I was walking in a lot of brush. I walked for roughly 3 hours, setting up camp for the night. It was late, and I was tired, so I fell asleep pretty quickly. I do remember that I woke up to a couple of times, once to go use the bathroom, and once to eat a quick snack. Never saw anything suspicious. I did not hear anything. Only sounds were crickets. After I ate something, I went back to sleep, and I had very strange dreams that I can't quite remember. But when I woke up, I felt very cold. There was somebody in the tent with me. I sat up, looked around. But then there was no answer when I called out. No movement. I reached for my gun, turned on the flashlight, and that's when I screamed. In the tent with me was a creature, a thing I'd never seen before. It was roughly 4 feet tall and very thin, a long neck and a long face. The eyes were huge and red. It had pointed ears and a very long and scissor-like fang protruding from its lips, kind of like a deathly sickly vampire. It was standing directly in front of me, still, staring into my eyes. I screamed as I pulled the trigger, but the bullet flew past the creature, did not hit it at all. I was terrified. I had no idea what to do. Now I knew I could not shoot at it, and I did not know if I could get it out of the tent. I just kept screaming, and that's when I saw 2 more of them coming out of the shadows outside the tent. They were identical to the one in front of me, and were approaching the tent very slowly, as if trying to be stealthy and quiet. I was convinced they were going to kill me. They were quiet and calm and slow, and were now surrounding the tent. I decided to use my weapon against them. I started yelling and screaming and making up as much noise as possible. I think all of my noise startled them, and they disappeared out of my tent, so I don't really know what happened to them. But all of my anger and noise woke up my platoon. I told them my story, but they thought I was crazy. They kept wondering why I was yelling and screaming. They actually had to shake me. You know, even after all these years, I still shudder when I think about it. Whatever they were not human, and they were not animals. They were the most terrifying creatures I've ever seen, and I hope I never have to see them again. I have been serving in the Oregon National Guard for 5 years now. I'm a combat engineer, and have been deployed in support of the global war on terror in Iraq. I'm not usually a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, and will believe what I see until I am presented with a reasonable explanation for the subject I'm about to describe. I'm writing this because I'm convinced that it should not be kept secret. The best way I can describe this incident is that the creatures seem to be almost trying to communicate with us. I'm not reporting this sighting to gain notoriety or attention. I'm in the public eye enough already. I'm reporting it because I think the public has a right to know about this. We were on a field training exercise that began on a Friday. We were in a convoy of 6 Humvees, driving at night in the middle of nowhere. It was a training scenario of some kind, but I don't exactly remember the details of the scenario. I was riding in the 3rd Humvee in the convoy. We were traveling along a road in the middle of a forested area, as Oregon is, and the road had a lot of elevation changes and tight corners. We were at the bottom of a steep hill, and had just made a hard right turn, when a creature appeared on the road in front of us. It stepped out from behind a large pine tree on the left side of the road and began walking across in front of our convoy. It was only about 20 feet ahead of us, and I still see it as clear as day in my head. It appeared to be big, a very hairy humanoid creature. At first glance, it looked like a huge ape, but it was walking upright, its arms swinging back and forth. They were longer than what I would expect from a human. It was covered in hair, but it was not coarse, matted hair, like you would see on apes in the zoo. It was long and hung down to the body in clumps. It was very dark, with a dull sheen to it. I can't really describe the face, but it was not flat like a human's face. It was sloped down on the forehead, and its face seemed kind of pointed. Its head was bobbing up and down as it walked, almost as if it were looking from side to side. When it walked, its arms were swinging back and forth, and bending its knees slightly. The gait was very ape-like. However, it was also very human-like, and it moved quickly. It was only on the road for a couple of seconds, and I don't know if it was aware of us, but it did not look at us or make any attempt to avoid us. From what I saw, its eyes were dark. All of this happened within a matter of seconds, and I still can't believe how quickly it moved. Within a matter of seconds, it stepped across the road and was gone, as quickly as it had appeared. I don't know if it was trying to communicate with us, but it seemed to me it was making a statement. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's the only way I can describe the feeling I got from it. And the moment that I felt like it was trying to communicate something to me. I can't explain why, it was this overwhelming feeling in the moment. I wanted to stop the convoy and look for it, but nobody else in the convoy seemed to even notice, and if they did not react. They just kept driving, and not a word was spoken. I was in the front seat of the 3rd Humvee, and the driver and gunner in the cab did not even react. I don't know if they saw it or not, but if they did, they didn't appear to notice. It was literally the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I can't explain what I saw, but I know what I saw, or at least I think I do. I'm a former U.S. National Guardsman and have security clearance. I have significant combat experience in Iraq and have been in some pretty intense life and death situations. I don't scare easy, and have been tested by life and death situations in the past. I feel a sense of responsibility to write this, as well as a sense of duty to let people know what I saw. I'm a skeptic at heart. I need people to know that I did not just see this for one moment and then forget about it. The event lasted for several minutes, and I stayed there for several minutes more after it was over, just to make sure this thing was really what I thought it was. Anyway, enough fluff. On to the encounter. It was about 2:30 a.m., and I was on patrol in a field, about a mile from my guard booth. My post was at an industrial park in the town of Redacted. We patrolled the industrial park every night, and this was an area that we had been to earlier that night. I had moved up from the rear of the patrol to the lead position, and was moving through some brush and trees on the side of the road. It was pretty dark, but my night vision was working fine. I had them on because we had done a couple of night patrols in the preceding days, and I liked to wear them. I was on a separate frequency from the guys behind me, so I was talking to myself as I was walking. As I exited the brush on the side of the road, I made a clearing to the side of the road and saw directly near me a massive creature. I had no idea what it was. It was on all black, on all fours. It looked like it had been sleeping, maybe. It raised its head and looked directly at me in response to my presence. I didn't want to fire my weapon, as it seemed like an innocent creature, but I was concerned for my own safety. Its appearance was frightening, let alone its size. My training told me that it was a dog, but it was massive, and I've never seen a dog that big. I later found out that there had been reports of a dog in the area, but I never saw a dog that big, not like that. I was close enough to make out its features very clearly. This thing had massive nostrils, and I could see inside of its mouth when it opened it. Its eyes were black, and its ears were pointed, kind of like a German shepherd's but more exaggerated and much, much larger. Its head was larger than a man's, and the fur was short, with a silver sheen to it. Its snout was also long, and more pointed. It had a long torso and very long legs. The thing that struck me as odd was its front legs almost kind of bent backwards, not forwards. I saw the creature for about a minute, and when I did, I realized, already, out of reaction, my weapon was aimed at it. I lowered my weapon, and the creature kind of just vanished. It quickly turned its head, looked back at me, and I swear, its eyes almost seemed to glow in the dark a little bit before it vanished. And I had this feeling of being watched afterwards. The hair on the back of my neck would stand up, and after it vanished by taking off into the trees, I could hear it crashing through the brush. I stayed there for a minute longer, then headed back to the rest of my patrol. I could not tell them what I had seen, and to be honest, I didn't want to. I was worried that I would look like an idiot. I eventually told one of my friends, who was also a member of the National Guard, and he kind of just laughed it off. I've seen some odd things in my time in the National Guard, but I've never seen anything like that before. I've heard of dogman stories in Wisconsin, as well as other strange sightings, but I always thought I'd be able to debunk them. What I saw didn't seem to be anything I could debunk, and I've seen a lot of things I can't explain. I'm still looking for answers. I'm not a believer in dogmen, but I'm not willing to rule it out just yet. I'm not the only one. I've had other guardsmen tell me they've seen things they could not explain. I'm willing to talk about this. I'm not sure what you could do with it, but I'm not sure what I saw. I've been told that it was a dog, but it didn't look like any dog I'd seen. I'm open to all suggestions. I'm also willing to talk about other people who've had similar experiences. I know that there are many others out there, and I feel that people have a right to know about these things. But I'm also not sure how to make people believe what we saw. That's why I'm talking to you. I'm hoping you can help me. I'm just going to preface this and say that the being I encountered is what I believe to be a reptilian. I'm a former member of the U.S. Army, and for the last year, I was a member of the Georgia National Guard. I was honorably discharged in October of this year, and I'm also a full-time student at Georgia State University, currently studying mathematics. I was on my way to my girlfriend's parents' house on Chastain Road. It was February 2014, and the sun had gone down. I had been running late, and I was almost 10 minutes late. I was in my car, waiting at the stoplight at Chastain and Spring Road. I was talking to my girlfriend on the phone, telling her I was going to have to call her back. The light had turned green. I was talking to her, and I was about to go through the intersection when I look over to my left and see this huge black thing coming from my left from the west. It kind of resembled a helicopter, but was different. It was flying parallel, and maybe about a block away. When I looked at it, it gave me this strange sensation. It was flying at the same altitude I was almost, and moving at the same speed. When I say it resembled a helicopter, I only mean that somewhat. It was some large craft or shape, but it was kind of just gliding through the sky, very low on the ground, almost. I wasn't sure what to think. I was kind of taken aback by it, to be honest. It was very, very bizarre. But as I turn my head to face forward, I see movement on my right side, right near my passenger door. It looked like a large man, but was far more muscular, and wearing this black leather suit. It had no hair, and I could see that its head was shaped more like a human, but there was something not right about it. There was something about it or him that made me feel very uncomfortable. I felt a sense of primal fear and danger. That's when I realized it was not a person or a human, but a being, and it was staring at me. And not just at me, but into my soul, with these very strange eyes. It was almost reptile-looking. It was standing there, leaning forward, looking in at me, observing me. I just remember I was sitting there, trying to figure out how I was going to get through this intersection. My body was so tense and frozen up. To my left, I had this odd black aircraft shape following me, and to my right was this reptile man being staring at me. But when I looked back up, the light was red. I could have swore it was green. But this thing, it was almost like it was projecting images into my head, like I was being physically probed. I remember that when I felt the fear and danger, I knew I had to get away from it. There was something about the way this being was looking at me. I was under attack, like I was prey. I don't know how to explain it. I understand my story is very strange, and trust me, living it was very strange. I felt in that moment that I was being hunted, that I was being preyed upon. It felt more like mind control. This being, it was awful, it was hideous, and I could not stand to look at it. Out of reaction, I started to cry. I was so overwhelmed with emotion and fear, and then I began to hear a loud humming, and a bright white envelop my entirety of my vision. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting in my driveway in my car. 4 hours had passed. I was so confused when I realized what had happened. My phone had also been completely depleted of battery, and was at 88% when I was talking to my girlfriend. My car, the battery had also completely died. I felt like I had been drugged, and was so upset I could not understand what had happened. I was crying, having a mental breakdown. That being, whatever it was, did something to me. It did something really bad. I believe that I was either abducted or it did something to my brain. It took something from me. And somehow, I can't explain the passage of time. My girlfriend, after speaking to her after this, had no idea why she could not get a hold of me for the next 4 hours, nor do I know where I went or what happened to me, or how I transported several miles away. Also, I believe the craft that was following me to my left was possibly the same craft this being flew in, but that's just speculation. I really have no idea. Sorry for the long story, and I hope you can make sense of it. I'm not the greatest writer, but feel free to write back if you have any questions. Married, 2 kids, American Indian. former chief of police and former investigator for the prosecutor's office, currently a special investigator for the Office of the Navajo Attorney General. I also have a master's degree in criminal justice, and am also a Navajo code talker. That alone is worth 3 silver stars. My father, his father, and my grandfather were all code talkers, and I was the first generation to go to college. My grandfather was killed by a skinwalker. My father killed one, and I have 3 encounters with them. So when I talk about skinwalkers, I speak with authority. Now, for the very first encounter, which I will share with you in this email, I was called by the police to assist on a homicide. The victim was a Navajo woman who was a known prostitute, sexually assaulted, strangled, and her throat torn from her body. Now, I don't want to throw any possible suspects under the bus, but the only possible suspect was a local guy who was a known sex offender. He had a violent history of attacking women, and specifically, women on the res. He was a prime suspect. Personally, I investigated his home and found the following: a deer skin and bones of a cat, a bloody knife, and a Bible with a picture of a guy's penis that was amputated. The Bible was open to a passage about witchcraft. I have no doubt that this was a ritualistic killing, but I also have no doubt that a skinwalker was involved. Now, the guy was arrested and I was very thankful to have him off the street, but after further investigation, we discovered that the guy was in a halfway house in Gallup, New Mexico, and he actually had an alibi for the time of the murder, so he was released from custody. We never found out who murdered this woman, but I believe to this day it was a skinwalker, and I know of at least 3 other homicides on the Reds that were ritualistic murders. The people committing these murders are not human. They are evil spirits that have to feed on the flesh of humans. They are not werewolves, zombies, or vampires. Specifically, they are skinwalkers, evil spirits. They are not the spirits of our ancestors or medicine men. They are not benevolent medicine spirits. They are evil. Okay, so before I go on, this was the time that I joined the Army, and then joined the National Guard. I was trained as an infantryman, and I served with joint forces in the Middle East. Then, I was sent to Afghanistan to assist with the War on Terror. I was a member of the 81st Airborne. I left the Army in 2011, joining the National Guard in 2012. I was sent to Afghanistan and Iraq, but this time as a special investigator. I did 3 deployments as a special investigator for the National Guard. I was sent to investigate the death of an American soldier who was killed by an IED. Once I was back home, I had 2 more close encounters with these beings in northern Arizona, and the 4th one on the Navajo Nation. This encounter was the most recent one, and I'm still actively investigating this case. But it is a skinwalker, I'm sure of it. I'm not going to release too many details, but I will tell you that it is tied to a missing person. The young woman was last seen with a man, then she disappeared. I have reason to believe that she was murdered. I have reason to believe that the man she was last seen with was a skinwalker. Now, if I'm right, I need to find the spirit and send it back to the underworld. Otherwise, it will keep killing. I also need to find this young woman's body. If I'm right, then it is buried somewhere, and I need to find it. This is why I need your help. I need to find somebody who can help me track and find this entity. I'm not afraid, but I don't want to send it back to the underworld without proof that it is a skinwalker. This requires a shaman. Even though I'm a former police officer and have been trained in the law and legal system, I've also seen things that cannot be explained. I have seen things that I cannot prove, and yet things that I cannot deny. If you know somebody who can assist, or you are a shaman yourself, please contact me. This needs to end now. Retired NGA here. I was in the military for a total of 36 years, and the last 14 of which were at NGA. I worked in security and counterintelligence. I am familiar with the military and intelligence operations at NGA. I have top secret security clearance. I also possess a master's degree in international security studies from the National Defense University. My thesis was on the management of foreign military liaisons at NGA. I'm also a certified instructor at Fort Belvoir's Command and Control Training Facility, teaching senior officers and NCOs in the interpretation of military maps and the command and control of military units. I have been to a number of schools and have several credentials. I have been recognized by a number of individuals for my military service. I have also worked closely with the FBI, CIA, DHS, State Department, Justice Department, and the White House, to name a few. I even run my own blog, but that's besides the point. I've written for 10 years on the subject and feel very educated. Because of this, I feel like I am a very credible witness. What I'm about to share with you, I've only shared with a handful of individuals. I've been asked by a friend to share my story. I've also been asked to do this anonymously, so I'll just give you my initials at the top. Here's what I know. I don't know squat about Roswell, but I do know that the NGA is closely linked to the UFO issue. I was a technician on a fire team at some time, assisting 2 field-grade officers as they worked on UFO material. We had a highly classified vault, which we used to store the UFO material. We had a sensitive, compartmentalized information facility, also known as SCIF, that we used to review the documents. I'm fully aware of the procedures for handling and storing this material. I was fully aware of the security issues involved in this material. In one document, there was a reference to a base here in Virginia. That's another reason why I'm here. I also know about the Joint Test and Evaluation Group, and more importantly, the Stand Still exercise. I'm aware of the Special Access Programs, or SAPs, and the Sensitive Compartmentalized Information Protocols. I'm aware of the various methods that are used to keep things secret. I'm also aware of the various security teams and programs which are used to keep special access programs secure. I'm also aware of how they operate and how they interact. I appreciate that the UFO issue is one that is directly linked to a number of other programs and how the overall security can be enhanced to an individual program. We had exercises and evaluators come into our department. We had a lot of interaction with group security. We have a lot of interaction with the Director of Security for NGA, who specifically worked for U.S. Army counterintelligence. 2 weeks earlier, we had a drill where we had to deal with a simulated crash. It was centered near Indian Head. At that point, I didn't know exactly what we were looking for, but we were dealing with 2 field-grade officers who were analyzing and using some sort of document that we were supposed to assume was authentic. The document was not ours. No idea where it came from or how it got there, but we were told that it was indeed authentic and needed to be taken seriously. Given the national security implications, the 2 officers decided that this incident needed to be reported as a genuine unknown object and needed to be reported up the chain of command. We went through reporting procedures. At one point, we called the FBI, but they had no idea, and basically passed the buck to another agency. We also contacted the base in Virginia, any personnel who were involved with some kind of exercise that also touched this unknown object. In essence, it was a real object, even though it was unknown. To make a long story short, the exercise was aimed at a presidential directive that called for a directed move on an object off of military property. It came to NGA, and that's why we were involved. And yes, we got it out of there. Besides that, I can't say anything, other than the next time I saw the document was at the International UFO Congress Conference in Arizona. During one of the days of my shift, we got a call from somebody who worked at the DC office of U.S. Customs who wanted clearance to enter the NGA area to meet us. Once we were satisfied, he met with the officers and explained to them that he was asked to pick up an item that was subject to customs to U.S. government inter-department protocol. He explained the document was to be returned to its rightful owner. He went on to explain that the object was found in custom territory, hence NGA was tasked with it. He explained that he was trained to handle this and was going to take it. I was part of the handover pack. I don't know the international protocols or how those are governed, but We do know that the document had to be returned to its rightful owner. Whether the UFO was a real object or not, my understanding is that the document was real, or it wouldn't have been breaking security regulations. On the other hand, if the document was going to be released, we would have to follow international rules, so there's no way an official notice could be released to anybody. Lack of documentation could make the whole situation useless. It was a highly classified program and was not allowed to go public. In conclusion, I will say this. That very document had ample details on a foreign biomechanical object that had several life forms within it. I'm 43. I am also a National Guardsman on work on the C-130s and the 146 Aeromedical Airlift Squadron as a flight engineer. I've been flying since 21 and have logged nearly 6,000 hours, including some commercial time. Over the years, I've had my share of odd encounters, including seeing a bigfoot in 1994, and one of my most memorable was seeing a UFO over Lake Michigan in January of 1980. The UFO was a classic flying saucer, with windows and a light on the bottom of it that must have used to signal us. I wrote up my experience and submitted it to the MUFON people, but I got no response, so I dug this out of my old files and I will send it to you. Anyway, this is my story. On January 4th, 1980, at about 11:15, a friend of mine, Jerry, and I were FFGB. That's Fire Guard Box, and all that means is that we're out manning a special fire area patrol. We were woken up, get in the car, and drive out to Barnum 33A hangar in Illinois. All that really means is we're on duty until around 11:30 when relief comes. We drive out to the hangar, park and sit for about 5 minutes until around 11:20, until we hear, approach control on 126.7, traffic 1700, off your 11 o'clock, squawk altitude. We are descending rapidly, 15 miles from you, heading over Lake Michigan. We see a strobe of lights start flashing and see a classic flying saucer coming in at about 900 feet, heading north side over the lake. After about a minute of driving toward the Yagi, we see a light on the bottom of the UFO flash on and off several times like Morse code. We see the UFO continue to exit the area in a southerly direction, to say the least. The weird thing about it, though, was that it flew for the briefest of moments, but I don't know, like the other way around. But it flew past us just as it was exiting. I saw the silhouette of its underside, really saw it from beneath it. This thing flew past us at about 10 feet and was about 30 feet in diameter. 2 windows, one on top, one on bottom, tube-shaped. When I saw it from below, it was completely black. The FAA guys also saw it but kept going, heading south. There were 2 more National Guard people coming in and we saw them talking on the radio. After they got off the runway, we just got back to our precinct. They got off the radio, and they kept driving out and saw the saucer trailing southbound. One of the planes in the 248th Composite Squadron sighted it as well, but nobody has talked to us or anything like that. Former U.S. Army combat vet, husband, hunter, and father of 4 boys. I'm an officer with a BS in criminal justice, 20 plus years experience, and I'm also a trained investigator. I'm also well educated, drug-free, and a law-abiding citizen who has nothing to gain by reporting this incident. I was a National Guardsman, assigned to the 442nd MPCO, and we were doing a full training at the Yakima firing range in Washington State. The entire company was present, which was around 100 soldiers. The range is a remote area. You drive down a long logging road just to get to the location. One night, one of the soldiers on guard duty called the CO, or commanding officer, for those who are not in the military, and reported that he saw a Bigfoot on the range. The CO and his first sergeant came to the guard shack, and the 3 of them went out onto the range. They returned several hours later, around 4 a.m. They were all clearly shaken and immediately canceled training for the next day, We were then driven back to the range on Monday morning, and each of us, including the CEO and the first sergeant, were interviewed about what we saw. The CEO did not wish to recount his story, but the first sergeant explained that the three of them went out to the suspected location, set up a metal tape, 2 yards long, and certified that the footprint came from a biped with a massive stride of about 8 feet long. The feetprints were around 18 inches wide. The CEO even admitted that the beam of his flashlight did not reach the top of the prints. The CEO added that a good part of the 2 yards long heel, the toe line, was in decent sunlight. We stood around it, obviously awestruck at this show of humility. We all looked at each other and thought of our own size, 15 boots. We may have added in an inch to the length, but not 12 inches. The CEO sent me out with tape to take measurements, but I could not duplicate the prints. I'm a pretty big and heavy-set guy. We were later told that we could not shoot up targets in the area. After all, even today, 14 years from now. As for what it is, we did not know what it was. It was scary. Personally, I think it was Bigfoot, and Bigfoot is alive and well. The government often doesn't want to admit anything that is unknown, so, therefore, it isn't. I was only 26 at the time. I was the first one to arrive on the scene. We were camped about a mile from the sighting. I'd been on my way to the latrine in the dark. I was a squad leader, so I had my private with me. I told him to stay in the truck and keep his M16 ready. There were a lot of reports of wolves and mountain lions in the area, and I did not want to get jumped by one. When I got back, the private was all excited, and he'd heard something screaming like a woman. He said it sounded like it was about a half-mile north of us. It was about 11:30 Pacific Standard Time, 12:30 Mountain Daylight Saving Time. I figured it was probably a lost hunter, a transient, or maybe some farmers looking for strays in the forest. We couldn't take the time to search for them in our gear, so I took my flare pistol, went to the main camp to see if they wanted to get a search party together to check out the sounds. It took me about 20 minutes to get there. There were about a half dozen Army and Navy personnel already gathered there. By the time we got ready to head out, we were 5 people, 4 armed with M16s. I was the only Marine, and they were all Army. One had a shotgun. We didn't tell them what the private had told me yet, that they couldn't make fun, and we wouldn't get any adverse reactions. I told the group that I'd heard screams like a woman. We figured that maybe 1 or 2 people had gone out hiking and gotten in trouble. That's a usual event in the area. We know of about 3 different times in the last 7 years alone where hikers have gotten lost and died. We decided on an area this private had specified where the screams seemed to be coming from. The area was about 3 miles from our campsite. We began in a single file. I was in front. The private who'd heard the sounds was between me and the rest of the line. About a quarter of a mile into the trek, we heard what can only be described as a group of people screaming and hollering and chanting something away from us, further to the southwest. The same general direction the screams had seemed to come from. The mountain slopes facing us on either side, and were lit by moonlight. We could see for only about a quarter mile. 3 of our guys with the training, experience in weaponry of .40 caliber weapons were very visibly disconcerted. 2 were shaking badly, with their weapons were level, and we were ready for a mountain lion to make his appearance. What we saw tore us up. The 5 of us were ready for a large predator because that was the nature of our weapons systems training. We were all on guard, so we could see it in the brush. Just over a small ravine on the opposite direction of the sounds we were hearing, so only I and the other guy were even able to look. We were all wearing night vision, to adjust for low-light lighting in the moonlight. Crossing in front of us was definitely not a bear, mountain lion, or other large animal. The most disturbing aspect of the whole shine, this happened in the middle of the night. Many were almost boisterous the way the things we saw moved through the brush, swinging from tree to tree, hopping up and down the slope, like they were on some playground. And when one of them crossed before us, we saw about 10 feet of their body reach of 2 or 3 of them. We could tell they were big and hairy from the way medium and dark brown hair covered them, completely, except for parts of their faces and the backs of their hands. It was apparent that they weren't very intelligent, and their behavior was strange, from the fact that their emotions stated a constant level of excitement or annoyance. They did several things that were menacing, like mimicry of weapons and other kind of human-like noises, but never of the volume of their screams, and what pauses for their faces were so inhuman in the darkness, color, texture, and features that it can't be put into words. One of the most disturbing on my list of boogeyman things that they did, I could postulate could have happened in an alternate universe, was one of them looked up before leaping across a ravine in front of us, and actually, it gave us a very serious look. Its large visible eyebrow moved across its upper lid, all surrounding the muscle of the eye, rested against, the way a normal human would squint to see better or reflectively shield his or her eyes against the glare of light. He seemed to have grabbed the second one, pulling away from it. I had my weapon safety off, with the selector switched to the two most common use rounds, with the shot pointed at the ground, and the sights at a 45-degree upward angle. I realized he was going to look at us. It occurred to me that if he used an arm or a leg to get away, or some other object, my weapon would likely trigger and discharge right then and there. But he seemed calm, busy, and very agile, kind of like chimpanzees. After that, they continued to move stealthily away from us, making easily leaps and sways and bounds up the mountain at incredible speeds and agility. We turned in the direction of the leader of the bunch, the main one we could see, and he had looked and moving at us. They were all approximately 5.5 feet tall. Our impression from the way they moved, their shrill screams, the eyes, and the hair impressions we can make out on their faces, hands, and the parts of their arms, these were pre-adolescent primates of about maybe 11 to 14 years old, or as you would call them, adolescent Bigfoot. I was taught that whatever you do, if it's you or them, you hope it will be them that dies. But I did not feel that way about them at all. Just that my life would be in jeopardy if we paths crossed with them again. I'm seriously considering wearing my headgear so this doesn't get on the internet. I'm still a practicing Christian. No one even knows what I saw except my wife. We never breathed a word of this to anybody, ever. I did have one other sighting that I know of that occurred in October of 1982 in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. I know of at least 2 more other sightings that occurred several years earlier in other parts of the National Forest surrounding Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams in Washington State. I also know of a couple of people who suffered from unusual losses around the same time, but there were never any overlap in witnesses, nor definitely tied-in evidence. If my name gets out, I could face some serious repercussions for sharing this.